Mike Poorman, statecollege.com, covers Penn State. Joins us Sikkim 365 Radio and 365 Sports as we're about to tour Blue Bloods, Penn State, Texas, and Notre Dame. Mike, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it, with Paul, Craig, and David Smoak as well. So what did Penn State need to at least find out by the time they wrap up this weekend in a couple of special places as far as the most important priorities?
There's a couple, but I'm interested in you guys put Penn State with your Blue Bloods. That's pretty interesting. They were 11-11 the last 2 years.
Well, it's more of an all-time status thing.
Yeah, that's a tradition thing for us.
Texas is in that
wouldn't
too,
be in that conversation either right now, unfortunately. And of course, Notre Dame has been playing a lot better.
I got you. Well, speaking of Texas, to answer your question, can Mike Yurcich, who spent that entire year at Texas, can he make the Penn State offense go? Penn State has not had a 1,000-yard rusher in its last 3 seasons. Sean Clifford's in his 19th year at Penn State. Penn State has the Gatorade Player of the Year in Nick Singleton and a 5-star quarterback in Drew Howler. So it's those 4 guys. Can they make the offense go is really the big question for next year.
Is that the real Achilles heel? Because the defense, for better or for worse, has still been pretty consistent under James Franklin in those 3 years.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Brent Pry, who went to Virginia Tech, did an excellent job, and now Manny Diaz, who didn't last in Miami, is running the defense. So defense is not the problem at Penn State. Penn State's offense has been offensive lately.
So what are they looking at as far as that running back room goes? What's kind of the projection for what they have in the cupboard and what they expect to lean on next season?
Well, Nick Singleton's it. I mean, they need a guy that can be the workhorse, that can carry 16 to 20 carries a game. He's a freshman. Any of you guys old enough to remember Don Nottingham?
Oh, yeah, the fullback played with the Colts. Yeah.
Oh, I'm impressed. His thighs are bigger than Don Nottingham. He is huge, figuratively and literally. If they can get 1,000 yards out of him, they'll be okay. But traditionally, Penn State needs that 1,000-yard rusher. They haven't had it. Singleton's the guy.
So James Franklin came with a lot of hype, of course, Vanderbilt, and his name has come up elsewhere as well. And I know that the COVID year was not good, and it's been a little bit down for their standards, as you mentioned as well, Mike, at 11-11. Where is everything with him? Does he need to have something special happen this year? And I say special, a team that competes for the Big Ten Eastern Division and maybe win it?
No. He signed a deal for 10 years, $85 million guaranteed, if you're going to count his year-end retention bonus. So if Penn State wants to get rid of him at the end of this season, they got to pay him over $60 million. So if they don't win a game, it's quite a parting gift. So, no. However, financially, he's set. But I have to tell you that the Penn State fan base is they're up in arms. Franklin has lately overpromised and certainly underdelivered.
Do they get mad because there was, whether it was him or not, his name comes up all the time in coaching searches?
Great question. It does. And he does not, and he will now. He has his contract, but he never really said, hey, I'm staying. I love it here. It's really, I asked him right after the USC job was open. I said, hey, why don't you just come out and say it, that you're staying, you love it here. He goes, I've said it. And I'm like, well, actually, you haven't said it. So I think emotionally, the fans are not as bought in despite that long contract.
Mike, Jahan Dotson was sensational last year, a great senior campaign, over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. But there's a young man, Parker Washington, here from the state of Texas, that I know is back for Penn State. Is he kind of the first in line as far as replacing Dotson's output? And what have you made of, or what is the expected, I guess, leap for Washington this year?
Nice tie into local. Parker. Parker, you're welcome. Parker was the number one guy following Dotson. Mitchell Tinsley, who came from Western Kentucky, where they passed 4 times out of every 5 downs. He's come in. He's a portal guy. So he's come in, literally taken over Dotson's spot and Dotson's number. But Parker Washington, I'm not saying this because he's from Texas. There's so much to like about that kid. I was talking to someone about him the other day. He's a smart kid. He's thoughtful. He has a great personality. He's wily. And he's still a little under the radar. I mean, he has big league potential. And I think having Tinsley there will actually open up even more opportunities for Parker than they did with Dotson there. Because Dotson was more of a, Dotson was a little bit of what Parker was, across the middle of the field guy, short guy. Tinsley's more of a deep guy. So it's a good move for Parker with Tinsley coming in, I think.
As you know, Mike, you and I spoke earlier today. That's State College, Matt Rule background, and of course, Penn State and the connection to Baylor and what he did to help turn them around, and now struggling in year 3 at Carolina. Your thoughts about you just know a little bit about Matt Rule and your thoughts about him.
Matt's, I'm sure they do other college areas, but Matt's Italian. His reputation is well-deserved, sincere, honest, genuine guy. Grew up in State College, was not a great player, but every time he's come back, he's been good. And quite honestly, if Franklin had gone, the 2 guys who were the 1 and 2 candidates, and speaking of Texas, Penn State would have hired Bill O'Brien or they would have hired Matt Rule if James had left, and both guys wanted the job.
Mike, the schedule for Penn State is not it's not forgiving. I mean, Purdue right off the bat, at Auburn, which they're in flux, but still going to Jordan-Hare, not an easy thing. Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State all on the schedule. And so there's not really a lot of gimmies once they get into it. Is there a buffer zone for James Franklin on this, for people to maybe re-embrace him, or is the schedule maybe not the best for a transitional year for them?
Great question. Sure, if they start out strong, they will embrace him. But last year they started 5-0, and then they only won 2 games the rest of the way. There's that potential. I think really James's Achilles heel is going to be Drew Aller, 6'5", 220 guy. He's got a massive arm. He really, if you're looking at practice, he looks like a junior Josh Allen. And it's just like if Clifford, who's in year 6 with the program, if he falters early, the fans are going to turn and they're going to want Aller. And I got to tell you, from the limited window in practice, Aller is a freaking stud.
Hey, Mike, again, statecollege.com covers Penn State with us on Sikkim 365 Radio. You can follow him at PSU Poorman on Twitter as well. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for asking, guys. Take care.
You too. Mike Poorman covers Penn State. And James Franklin started in 2014. He's 65-28, 40-23 in the conference, of course. Had a couple of teams that were right there on the edge, but the last couple of years, COVID year was bad, but it was for many. And then last year, they kind of just dangled in many ways, as he mentioned as well. When we come